Hello and welcome, I'm Oles Gerjuk and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. Today we're talking about an experimental project called the Community Culture Bus. This is a mobile cultural hub converted from a regular bus. It travels through small towns and villages, popularizing contemporary art and culture. To tell us more about it, we welcome to our studio today Clemens Poole, artist and curator from New York City. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So you are participating in this project, and as we understood, it aims to support culture and cultural initiatives in the rural area. So could you please tell us how do you do that?
How we actually do it remains to be seen. We're still determining the best program for the bus, but at its core, the idea is to visit a number of cities in the next few months. There's cities that responded to an open call that Izolatia put out for proposals for cultural events. My team and I went through the responses to this open call and selected cities that had compelling proposals, and we are now scheduling visits to these cities in which we present a number of different cultural programs, including lectures, exhibitions, workshops, screenings, etc.
So those are going to be the activities that you will have in those cities. But what about bus? I mean, you're having a bus, so why do you need a bus? And could you please explain us what is inside the bus, or maybe this bus is only for the team to travel to those cities, or maybe you have something special in that bus?
The bus itself inside has been converted to something like a mobile gallery. Usually we have one exhibition when we do these trips. In the last trip, we showed silkscreen prints from the Omsh silkscreen studio that's associated with Izolatia and their iZone creative hub. We also have a space where we can convert it to a screening area, and so we showed some films and some video art in there.
In the bus? In the bus. That's impressive.
And then we also, when we arrive to the place, we usually unfold all of our furniture and other things and claim a space next to the bus, which also becomes an extension of the bus's activities, and that's where we run our workshops and where we set up our library.
That's so cool. How many visitors can fit in the bus at once?
I think at some of the locations we visited, we had, almost 30 people trying to pack in there, but it's more limited than that. So I think around 20 people for a screening is pretty good. When people are looking at the exhibition, it needs to be fewer people, but a lot of the visitors that we've had in the different locations have been younger people and children, and so for them it seems to be fun to just be in the bus and run around in there and check it out. So I don't know if it matters if there's too many kids in there when we're trying to show the exhibition or not. I mean, if they're having fun, I'm okay with it.
What kind of art do you exhibit in the bus?
We've had 3 different exhibitions during the course of the project. There was one exhibition at Kiev Art Week. I was not involved in the project then, so I'm not sure exactly. I can't speak to that curatorial project. But we then showed photographs in Borispol 3 weeks ago, and we showed, as I said, silk screens from the silkscreen studio that's connected to the iZone creative hub.
What topics do you touch with those exhibitions? I mean, what are these exhibits about?
The silkscreens were specifically shown because we wanted to strengthen the connection between the actual working part of the bus, which is the workshops that people can participate in, and the exhibition. So by showing silkscreens from the same studio that is presenting the workshop, we felt that we could present the possibility of this kind of creative practice to our participants. So if you're some kid and you come to the bus and you see people silkscreen printing and they offer for you to do this printing, you can then go in the bus and you can see what other artists have used this same technique for.
That's interesting. So basically you are showing some modern arts to the rural area.
I would say yes. Up till now, I think everything has been, could be classified as contemporary art. We do have a potential idea to show some archival material about early Donetsk that was put together by a Welsh artist named Stefan Kadek. That isn't confirmed yet, but the space has potential to show a diverse kind of exhibition.
What kind of problems or maybe challenges with contemporary culture do you witness when you travel around this rural area? Because in Ukraine, historically, it happened that basically the traditions have been always preserved in the rural area, but traditions is just a part of culture, and of course there are different aspects and different spheres and definitions of it. So could you please expand on that?
Actually, I think that's a really great question. I think that's the question that's at the core of the initiative. But I also think it's really important to not dismiss this other conception of culture as a traditional thing. What I like about the bus is that we're in conversation with that, and we force ourselves into conversation with that, especially because my team is made up of younger people from an urban center or who now live in an urban center who practice cultural activities that resemble more contemporary art or things adjacent to contemporary art.
Which is not about tradition.
Which, I mean, one could argue that there is some tradition in it, but it's very different than the idea that you go to the village and people say, oh, I need to show you our traditional crafts. But what I would like to do with the bus, and I don't know if we've done it successfully yet, but we're working on our programming around the idea of asking the question why these traditional crafts are the first thing that come to mind for some people when they consider culture, and then also why we would have this almost neo-colonial imperialist idea that we should go and we should somehow present this like contemporary culture as if that is somehow better or as if people need to learn it. I don't know where this assumption comes from at its root, if it's not from some kind of imperialism. And that makes me very uncomfortable, but I like the discomfort of the project and having to ask this question of myself and the team.
So basically you're discussing how to approach people in a better way so they kind of perceive your message about culture and art, about the modern art, yes, contemporary. But could you please still tell us what challenges do you see people have with understanding contemporary art, or maybe there is a lack of cultural initiatives in the rural area, because we do know that Ukrainians, well, in Ukraine, we do think that Ukrainians are very talented, and people in rural areas, they have lots of talents, but still, it's not even about talents. Does culture exist in small towns and villages of Ukraine? Well, let's focus on contemporary art.
I can't answer that. The bus has been to 6 cities while I've been working on it. I myself have been to other cities in Ukraine. I've traveled to Ukraine many times in the last 5 years, so
It's like not enough location to estimate.
Well, I maybe just take issue with the question of is there culture, is there contemporary culture in a Ukrainian village? And I think the bus initiative should push back against that question. And I think the bus initiative should, rather than say, like, is there even culture here? How can we bring culture here? How can we support a kind of decentralization of cultural production? I think it's much more interesting for the bus to go to these places and ask people to reframe their ideas of culture.
That's cool.
So a lot of our initiatives are based on the idea of reframing culture and posing questions rather than giving answers. And I would like all of the programming to do that. And every part of the programming that is so far inadequate and doesn't ask a question, we're currently working to remake and remodel it into something that's just posing the question of what is like the frame of culture. For example, we have this initiative called the White Cube. And so we have a white cube gallery that's about this big. And it folds up, but we set it up everywhere. And what it is a sort of tongue-in-cheek comment on the idea of the White Cube Gallery. And the theory coming out of like the 70s and afterwards that this White Cube Gallery comes up in the moment of minimalism and when contemporary art starts to need this space to assert itself. And so we want to ask people, what can you put in this space, and how does it change the thing, or how does this space change, or it's all about the question of why this is in the art theory.
Basically, you make them think and answer those questions so maybe they can understand this art, because that's what I wanted to ask. How do they react to the contemporary art? Because for many Ukrainians that that lack knowledge about art, and maybe they are lacking the opportunities to visit some galleries to see the art, yes, and these cultural initiatives, or to be involved in there. So they are having troubles to understand the contemporary art. Sometimes they cannot see the idea behind it. So how do people in smallest towns and villages react to art that you exhibit?
It's funny, people in the smallest town that we went to were enthusiastic, were ready to participate, were ready to ask questions, were uninhibited when they wanted to discuss this, and uninhibited with their opinions. People in the cities that are slightly bigger and maybe have more funding for culture had a much more fixed idea of what they thought. But in both cases, the conversations were really interesting. In the places where people maybe had a more fixed idea, I think it's actually really valid for someone to say, well, I don't think this print that you're showing is art or is beautiful or whatever. Because I myself have questions like this about contemporary art, and that's why I'm interested in posing questions, because I myself don't know. And I would rather talk to people than go to people and tell them. And I think there's a culture, especially even in Kiev, in contemporary art in general, in Ukraine, there's this culture of sort of lectures. People like to go to lectures, it seems, and hear someone speak, and there's a panel of people speaking.
But it's better to question, yes, indeed. It's
I
always
like
better
the
to have a
discussion
dialogue,
more.
yes.
Yeah.
And I think that there is some kind of educational part in it, so people do not just listen to a speaker and just perceive the knowledge as something unnegotiable, right? But they can question some certain things, and whether something is an art or something is not an art. So we run out of time, but I would like to ask you the last questions about the route of this bus and future plans.
So we're still scheduling our next trips, but so far the plan is to travel to the northwestern part of the country in 2 weeks. And that will be our next trip. We'll probably do 5 locations. We'll come back to Kiev, take a week off, I think, maybe do 1 day trip, and then most likely go to the southeast. And then I think we'll have time for 1 more trip, or maybe 2, before this funding cycle ends in October.
Well, this initiative sounds very fun. Thank you so much for providing us with this interesting information, and thank you for being a guest today in our studio.
Thank you.
That was Clemens Poole, artist and curator from New York City. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Ales Gerjuk. Goodbye.